Wow, you know what? This road to the Super Bowl has been great. And a lot of it is because of Jim Steeg, the Super Bowl expert. I mean, Jim Steeg worked for the NFL for what, about 36 something years, and he was in charge of Super Bowls for about 25, 26 of those years. From 1980 to about 2004, he was the guy that was in charge of the site, making sure everything went well, the pregame show, the halftime show, all of that stuff, okay? So let's call Jim one last time and ask him the only two questions that remain to be asked here. Let's see. Let's see if he's home. He's back there in North Carolina. I mean, nothing could be finer than to be in Carolina in the morning. Okay, or anytime. I love Carolina. Let's see what he's got to say. If he's home, I don't know. He may be home.
Hello.
Oh, there he is. How's it going, Jim?
Fantastic. Everything's going great.
I'm sure you recognize the voice. This is Terence Moore calling. You know, and this is so sad because I mean you've been so great here all these months on the Terence Moore's road to the Super Bowl, and there's no better way to end than to ask the Super Bowl expert, a guy that did all these Super Bowls, what's your favorite moment or moments, and what's your least favorite moment or moments. And let's get the least favorite one out of the way, okay? I think I kind of know. I think I kind of know. But just to make sure, what was your least favorite Super Bowl moment in all the Super Bowls that you were in charge of?
Well, I think of all the things that took place, it's funny. I went through, 26 of these, and I can't tell you how many speeches I gave, and how many times the question was always asking me, well, what is the one thing that went wrong? And I literally, for 24 years, never had an answer because there was not anything of any consequence. I mean, I talked about the day I forgot the coin toss. We got it there in time, so nobody ever knew that we lost it, or, the day the float didn't, fit for the halftime show in New Orleans in 1990, but we fixed that. Nobody ever knew that took place. But obviously, the thing that's most disappointing is everything that surrounded the halftime show, in Houston in 2004, and everything that we thought was going to get done there, and how important it was. And one of the ironies of that is that Bob McNair was very vocal about what he thought needed to be done for that, and we went the other way from that. And I remember having to go to his house like about 3 weeks after the game and literally apologize to him on behalf of everybody, at whatever we were, 280 Park Avenue.
Wow.
In those days, tell him that we were sorry for what took place and we let him down. So I think that was the most disappointing moment.
And of course, Bob McNair being the owner of the Houston Texans back then, and all these owners want things to go exactly right, But let's get to the positive stuff. And I'm sure there's been several. And let's start. Well, let's do it like this. Let's do a 1A, 1B, 1C. Of the litany of great things you remember about the Super Bowl, let's go with 1C, but it may be all together. Let's just start 1C.
Well, 1C, I can tell you what 1A is. I got to think through the moments. I mean, the one that I was most proud of that we did was probably Super Bowl 16 back in Detroit.
I was there.
And that was probably a little bit selfish because, I had been put in charge of this game in 1979. And that was the very first game that I had in charge of from A to Z. And among the highlights that year, I remember walking into Pete Rozelle's office and saying, listen, our anthems in those days had been, the Colgate Five, Helen O'Connell, and people like that. And I said, listen, we're going to Detroit. There's only one person that could do the anthem in Detroit.
Oh, yes.
And that's Diana Ross.
Mm-hmm.
And he looked at me and says, okay, kid, sure. You got snowball's chance in hell of getting that done. Go ahead and try. And obviously I went, knocked on the door, met with her, and, it happened.
Wow.
And then obviously she came back 14 years later and did the halftime show in Phoenix. So that game to me had so much that took place. It was the first time we had a real host committee. I thought the halftime show, which was Up With People, was the best halftime show that we did. There was a lot of things that went good, and there were a few things that went bad, but it's one I take a lot of pride in what took place.
But I'll tell you what, before you continue, I want to tell you what I really liked about that Super Bowl. You guys took the media on a tour of the Ford Museum. And since I'm a Kennedy assassination buff, it was great that I saw the actual limousine that JFK was riding in on November 22nd, 1963. Thank you very much.
Yep. Well, they did such a good job with the media there because they understood you were going to Detroit.
Yes.
And it wasn't like you were going to go hit tennis balls or you're going to play golf or, do whatever it is. And so they really made a conscientious effort to take care of everybody. And it was, like I said, having the first host committee, and the host committee was really designed to take care of the media and to take care of the fans coming in and give them something to do, because it was something the league didn't get that involved with. We focused on the media a great deal because that was a Roselle thing to make sure that that was our first priority in a lot of ways, how we handled things. But the host committee did a fantastic job there. And I think, from meet and greets at the airport when everybody came in
Sure.
I remember we had an ice storm there that certainly was worse than the one we had in Atlanta.
Yep.
On the Friday night before the game. So, we've gone through a few ice storms, let's put it that way.
Let's go to 1B on your list.
Oh, I think, it probably has to do with a lot of the things that took place in Stanford in 1985. I mean,
Sure.
I hate to date myself that all this stuff is 30 years ago.
Hey, I was there.
It was so formative in what took place around the game. That was the beginning of corporate hospitality as it now stands. I mean, we had 26 tents out on the grounds at Stanford, and now corporate hospitality is its separate company, multi-million-dollar company that does that. We started with decor in the stadium because Stanford Stadium was, a 2x4 by 2x4 built stadium.
Right.
So we got fine colors involved to do that. We did things, we didn't have any lights in the stadium, so we had to go out and get Musco to bring in temporary lights to light the stadium and the outside. The restrooms, most of them were porta potties, and we had to figure out how to light the porta potties. We had to build concession stands. We spent $3.5 million with a gentleman who passed this last year, Jerry Anderson, as our architect, to build new press box and new locker rooms and meeting rooms and interview rooms and things like that. So it was really an accomplishment, and again, I think was so important because we come off Detroit, we'd gone through the strike, in '83, and this was a chance. San Francisco was a new site. There was a lot of great things about the city of San Francisco, but Stanford was certainly full of challenges, and a lot of people that worked on that game became part of our team forever.
Wow.
The guy that did the tents, his company still does a lot of the construction projects around it. Jerry Anderson, as I touched on, worked with the league, for 10 years after I left. So there's a lot of people that came about that. I just thought it was a great experience, and I think it was, a turning point for the game in a lot of ways on how we did stuff, and a turning point for me because it gave me confidence going forward that I could do things, portable jumbotrons being put in the stadium, to add to the enjoyment of the game, stuff like that.
And let's go with 1C.
1C? I thought we were 1A.
Oh, was that 1A?
I think we're 1A.
Well, but you know what?
Now we're at A.
The beautiful thing about doing 1A, 1B, and 1C, that means that they're all equal. So we'll just say, what's the third number one you've got?
Well, it's Super Bowl 36 in New Orleans. We did so much. I mean, realized that 9/11 happens, 110 days out from that game or something like that. And the game has to move back a week. We have to go through the struggles of moving it back a week, and with the automobile dealers trying to get them to move, swap dates with us, which took a while. There were probably another 20 things in New Orleans that had to be moved. We got to move back state all the way down to weddings and jewelry shows, things like that. Nobody gets married on Super Bowl Sunday, but they certainly do the week after.
Yeah.
Now we had to tell people that they couldn't use the ballroom at the Marriott because of it's being used for a Super Bowl event. And we changed the entire way security was dealt with, with outside perimeters and magnetometers, and Secret Service getting involved with everything, outside mail facilities, things now that everybody kind of look at as standard, that in the span of after we finally got it all up and go, maybe 80 days, changing everything. And the entire entertainment around the game. I had a great partner with Fox and David Hill, a halftime show with U2, able to get Mariah Carey to do the anthem, who had turned us down numerous times before, pregame show, being able to honor everything that took place around 9/11 and all the events with that. And then, a game that literally was decided on the last play of the game with Adam Vinatieri's, winning
Sure.
kick. I just think it set a standard for, I think, every event in the world and how it was run, and the fact that we were able to do. I mean, remember your credentials, and before that were little paper passes, and now they're photo IDs with where you have to go through a background check and things like that, and all that turned in the span of a couple months to get done. So I take a lot of pride in that. And the other thing, I think, Terence, was so important to me. If you remember where the country was at that moment in time,
Yes.
nobody was traveling. Nobody was going to big events, and things like that. They were all afraid of what was taking place. And with what the success we had at that event and the success the Winter Olympics had in Salt Lake right after that, I think we turned the country around. I think we got everybody back on airplanes, and, big events could happen again, and people felt safe. And so I just think it was a critical moment, and I was so proud of everything we accomplished.
Hey, we're going to end with this because this ties right into what you just said there, Jim. The Super Bowl has turned into this. It's more than a sporting event. It's more than. It's bigger than life for the most part. And what is it about the Super Bowl? Whether you're a football fan, whether you're not a football fan, what is it that has gotten it to this point where it is just this entity that there's nothing like it on the face of the earth? Well, regardless of sporting event, it's the biggest event that you can possibly imagine. What is it that has caused it to be this thing?
Well, I think the biggest thing that happened to this is Pete Rozelle. I really think his vision, and you think about this, originally playing the game in, the two top media capitals and entertainment capitals of the world, you could say, Miami and Los Angeles, and then throw New Orleans into it, one of the all-time party sites, and that was the rotation for a long time. It was in early January. Everybody was looking for what's my next escape after, New Year's, what's my next holiday or something I can plan around. And so I think it had an awful lot to do with that. I think his vision of always trying to push us and allow us to experiment to try to get better and do things for the first time there so we could either lead the industry or lead our clubs to doing new things. I mean, we put a Jumbotron in the stadium at the Rose Bowl in 1983, and up until that point, there were no video replays or video anything in any stadium that the NFL played in.
Wow.
Even the one we had in New Orleans with the Idafor system, they weren't allowed to show anything but commercials on it. So it's changing that. So being allowed to push the envelope, make it something, and when you go there, establish it with an idea that was always my philosophy, was for a vast number of people coming to this game, this was a once-in-a-lifetime experience, and you wanted to make sure it would be something that they would always remember and talk about, years later after they'd gone back and said, I remember when this happened, or would you believe that, they gave us radios to listen to our radio broadcast, or, things like that. And I take so much pride in, everything. But I think that, and then when you look at the entertainment around it, it's more than a football game. Pete always said to me, I can't always count on the game being 20-19 with a missed field goal.
Right.
At the last play, it's probably going to be 55-17 every once in a while. I've got to make sure that if that happens, there's enough else going on. People say it's a great game. And Leonard Levy, who was the head of the Tampa host committee for a couple times, said to me after Super Bowl XVIII, he said, he called me the next day and said, that was the greatest football game I've ever been to. And I said, it was an awful football game. When Theismann threw the interception at the end of the half and Jack Squire, ran into the end zone, it was over, right? I think the final score was, 38-16?
Yep, and the great Marcus Allen run.
He said, no, to him, the game was all about the minute he left his garage until he got back in his garage, that the entire day was just so spectacular around what he did, whether it was parties or the entertainment on the field and things like that. So I think that really is the key, is to making it, something that is totally memorable and unforgettable.
Jim, for years, if not decades, after Adolph Rupp retired as the legendary czar of Kentucky basketball, and they built this arena for him, Rupp Arena, and they had this special chair right at courtside for Adolph Rupp, that whenever he came to the game, he would be right there in that chair, because Rupp Arena was the house that Adolph Rupp built. You're the guy that built the Super Bowl. So on February 3rd at Mercedes-Benz Stadium right here in Atlanta, Georgia, you're going to be at the Super Bowl, and they're going to have a special chair, a special seat for Jim Steeg somewhere down around the 50-yard line. Is that correct?
Well, I appreciate that thought. That's very nice of you to say that. But, I'm the product of a heck of a lot of people. And I think it was a comment made once of a great head coach. He does a great job of hiring assistants. I think I did a great job of hiring really good people to work for me. And they really helped push the – and we never accepted what we did. The great line is, if you come out of an event and think everything went 100%, then you don't know what you're doing. So how you can improve the next year was always important. It was always a stepping off point, and that, to me, was so critical. And I'm grateful. I miss a lot of the people that some of them have passed on, and a lot of us are now scattered around the country. But we had a heck of a team putting it all together.
And that, ladies and gentlemen, is the Super Bowl expert. See you next time.